Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Cyra Sweet Dumitru, a poet whose words don't just speak, they heal. Cyra is a published poet and instructor of poetry with 4 acclaimed collections to her name: What the Body Knows, Listening to Light, Remains, and Elder Moon. Her poems have graced the walls of City Hall, echoed through the halls of museums, and been heard on national public radio. She is one of only 4 certified poetic medicine practitioners in Texas, trained through the Institute for Poetic Medicine, and she spent decades guiding others through the healing power of words. For 2 decades, Cyra taught rhetoric, poetry, and narrative medicine at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. Today, she facilitates therapeutic writing circles for adults facing trauma, grief, depression, anxiety, and religious wounding, creating a sanctuary where words offer refuge, resilience, and renewal. Cyra's work is rooted in personal experience. As a teenager, she witnessed the devastating loss of her eldest brother, David, who died by suicide, a tragedy that fractured her world. In her powerful new memoir, Words Make a Way Through Fire, Healing from My Brother's Suicide, Cyra chronicles her long journey toward healing, weaving together threads of creative expression, spiritual exploration, and the slow, courageous reconstruction of a life forever changed. I'm eager to talk with Cyra, who will be speaking to us from San Antonio, Texas, about her profound journey through grief following her brother David's tragic suicide, how writing became a vital path for processing trauma and loss, and what it means to practice the healing art known as poetic medicine. We'll also discuss her remarkable memoir, Words Make a Way Through Fire, that offers a powerful testament to healing and resilience, and the solace Cyra found in a transcendent presence she calls voice. As a special gift, Cyra will read 2 profoundly moving poems from her memoir that will surely touch hearts, stir souls, and remind us of the power of language to heal what feels shattered. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, Cyra. A warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you, Irene. I am most honored and moved to be here today. And thank you for that gorgeous introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, it's available. I can make it into a PDF and you can spread it around. I love telling our listeners who you are and what you've accomplished so that they are listening with respect to what you have to teach them, to share with them. And your story is amazing. And talk about trauma and heart-stopping. Let's start there. You witnessed your eldest brother David's suicidal act when you were 16 and he was 19. What would you like to share with us about that? Such a tragic day, my goodness.
Well, it was a Friday afternoon in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's where we were living. We'd been living there for probably 10 years or so. And it was in February, which is kind of a cold and dreary month in Ohio. And my dear brother David, I 3 brothers. David's the eldest, and he had been struggling with depression. This is 1974. There's so much more understood now than there was then about depression and just resources available. So it was clear that he was struggling with something. And that particular afternoon, it's a Friday night, and I was getting ready to go on a date. I was going to go to a basketball game with my boyfriend, and my mother and David and myself and our younger brother, Peter, and then a family friend named Charles. We'd all had dinner, sat down for dinner. And David was very inward, very, very quiet, kind of brooding, I would say. And after dinner, a lot of things happened. Mom needed to go to the library and work on some research downtown. My younger brother went to the movies with Charles. And then it was myself and David, and I was very focused on getting ready to go on this date. But I do remember standing in the kitchen with David, and everyone else had left. So it was the two of us. And we were just putting dishes there in the kitchen from the dining room table. And I remember him just stopping and kind of looking at me. The best way I can describe it is if doom had an energy, if doom had a scent, that was what I was sensing from David. And I was worried, but I was scared. I just felt a kind of whirlpool from that. And it was overwhelming to me, but I also was clear in my mind that I had kind of a choice. I could kind of step toward him and try to see what was going on and be empathetic, or I could step away and get ready to go on the date. And I was 16 years old and I was overwhelmed. So I stepped away, and really just within a few minutes later, I could hear him. He was outside. The methodology that he chose was not instantaneous. It was not painless. He died quite a few hours
He
later.
lit himself on fire, right?
He did. Yes, he did. Yes. And I had a moment. I was standing in my small bathroom, brushing my teeth, and we were in a ranch-style house. So there was a window behind me, and he was able to walk as a flaming person. He walked
Oh my God.
toward the window, so I could see out the window what was I could see that was fire in this, and I thought, he is taking his own life. And I had a dream actually several days before this that was not that exact situation, but it involved me watching him deliberately put himself in a situation that was going to take his life. And I knew that dream was very, very important. So when I sensed what he was doing, I thought, oh my goodness, that dream, something's
Here
trying
it
to
is.
scare me. Yes. So, but just before I went outside to do what I could, which wasn't much, I was spoken to. That was, I know we'll talk about this more a little bit later, but that was when what I've come to call voice made itself explicitly present. And this voice called me by name. This had never happened to me before. And it said, Cyra, this is going to be very hard for you. You're going to see and hear and smell things that are going to be very hard. Part of you is going to have to hide, but part of you is going to have to go out there and deal with this and do what you can for your brother. And it said, but someday this is all going to circle back. Someday this is all going to circle back. And I understood in that moment, again, something larger is trying to prepare me. And I don't know what this means, but I have to go out and do what I can. And I basically ended up going to the neighbors, calling for an ambulance and a fire truck, and they came and took David, and he went to the burn unit, and he died some hours later. I was able to speak to David. I was able to tell him I loved him, and that was meaningful. I certainly did not make it to the basketball game. No, that did not happen. Everything changed. Everything changed for the entire
Oh God. My God, my God. So I'd like you to please explain how, because you used writing as a means of processing your trauma and loss. So how can writing be an effective means for doing that? And please describe your healing path of recovery over decades of
Decades.
creative expression through writing poetry. And you also did spiritual exploration and the slow, courageous rebuilding of your life. And before we get to that, I just want to tell our listeners that when I was told by my voice that Saul has to go, many lessons will be learned from his death. Like you, Cyra, when the accident happened and I saw that he was indeed gone and all of that, it also comforted me, even though I still had the grieving and the healing and everything, but I had that, it was such a blessing. I had that bit of comfort that had come through. I so relate to what
Yes.
happened to you.
Yes. And that's really meaningful as well to hear. There are these larger patterns, these larger, mysterious, miraculous, mystical patterns that can make themselves known.
Yeah, and when people think it's baloney, try having an experience like this. I
Yeah.
mean, right? So
Yeah.
right? So tell us about
Yes.
writing and how you turned to, did you always know that you were a writer? Were you seeing the signs of that even as a kid?
Yes, I was really fortunate with my parents in that literature, language, and stories were very important to them. So, my earliest memories are twofold. They are of our mother reading aloud, like Peter Pan and some of these other stories, and she had the gift of drama. So she would read the stories, the characters, like in their character voices. So she made it very alive. And then our father, who worked in New York City, we were living in Connecticut then, and he would come home on the train, and then we would often go back to the beach in Connecticut, where we spent so much of our time, and gather around a campfire, and Dad would tell us vintage stories. So I was already a listener. I was a listener because of them. And my imagination was very alive, very stimulated. And I knew that words made things real and made them come alive. And then when I was 6, I started first grade young, and we were learning our letters. And I found just learning to make the letters of the alphabet so interesting because they looked like little animals to me. Some of them have tails, like the J has a tail, and an F has sort of a little, I don't know, a little tail that goes up, I guess. So they looked like little animals to me. And I found myself one day, I think I was sick and I was home from school, and I was thinking about a bird, and it was a bluebird. And it was in my mind just as this image. And I thought, oh, I'm going to write a poem. So I found some paper and a pencil, that wide paper that you use when you're learning to write. We had some at home. I mean, there are 4 small children at home. So, and as I started to write certain words like bird, like b, ah, da, and then blue. I don't know how I spelled blue at that point, but I noticed, Irene, as I wrote these words, the bird wasn't in my mind anymore. It was as if the bird was in the room now with me,
Wow.
singing. And I knew in that moment that writing was always going to be important to me, that
Yeah.
it was a way of creating and making what was up here move into the world and be real, so that it was powerful and it was beautiful and magical, all of that. So, and then I was fortunate enough in like 4th or 5th grade to have a teacher who gave me my first journal. And my family was going off on this trip to Europe for like 6 weeks. And she said, "This is a very special trip. You need to write a lot of your memories down." And so that was a very powerful message, that what you notice, Cyra, like that message to me was, what you're going to experience is going to be important, and you want to leave a record of it. And by writing it down, you're going to notice it even more. And I still have that. I found that. I still have that. Then by the time I was in high school, there was a lot happening inside of me, and there was a lot of kind of disruption in the family, a lot of extended family issues. So I began to simply to journal, to kind of try to find out what my feelings were and all of that.
It sounds like that was your refuge in a way.
It was my refuge. It was. And it was my way of trying to sort things out. And I noticed that I would often write with line breaks. So it was just natural to me to express my feelings and to express the images in my mind, to put that on paper. So after David's death and after the trauma of witnessing that death, I was in shock, as
to say the least.
as trauma survivors are, for quite some time. And what I was able to express later, I had such a tangle of feelings within me. And eventually the metaphor that I found for that eventually was like that there was this huge octopus, and the huge octopus had moved in to me. It was occupying my trunk, my whole trunk area. And eventually I could understand that one tentacle was grief, one tentacle was
Oh,
shock,
wow, that's great.
another tentacle was confusion, another tentacle was blame, and one was anger, and then one was self-doubt. Can I trust myself? Because I was the last one to speak to David, and I made that choice not to step forward and be
You
concerned.
must have felt guilty. There was a big tentacle that called guilty.
Yes. And so I think one of the first roles that writing played that was so important to me after David's death, and I'm trying to find a language for my experience, was the more that I wrote, the more I was beginning that work of trying to rebuild a center from which I could reflect. Because I was so shattered. I was like a chandelier that had fallen on the floor, on a marble floor, and just shattered into a million little pieces.
I want to also volunteer that your parents must have been grieving, so that you couldn't really get a lot of solace from there either, right? Your family was grieving, and it was in those days where
Yes.
there wasn't a lot of help for these situations.
There just wasn't. There are all kinds of wonderful bereavement centers now, and thank goodness. And I'm a strong supporter of them in many ways. They make a big difference. So the writing gave me a way to kind of stop and listen inwardly and begin to get some language to my feelings, which then began to make me feel like there was something inside of me that was becoming a little solid again. And then there was one poem in particular I wrote in college. So this is maybe 2 years after David's death. I'm in college. I'm still in shock. I'm still confused by everything, and I am often in a lot of internal pain. And so sometimes what I do, because there's so much processing I have yet to do, and I am self-medicating, and I am numbing myself with alcohol and with other substances, and I don't like that I'm doing that. I know that I'm doing that to an extent that it's not healthy, but I couldn't quite really intervene and kind of stop myself. Like I just couldn't interrupt that. But fortunately, I was taking a poetry writing course at the time, so I had something of a practice of writing poems. And one day, Irene, I wrote a poem called The Faceless Day, which is in the book. But this poem basically told me that I was so disconnected from myself that part of me didn't want to be attached to that part of me that was not healthy. It wanted a different way. And it gave me the answer in the poem. Like I was having a conversation in the poem with this disconnected part of me, which I will say now, looking back on it, I also believe that was voice speaking to me.
I think you're channeling through your poetry and through what you're writing, right?
Yes, I absolutely.
In a way, it's the way it's coming through you.
Yes, I believe it is. Yes, the unconscious mind, the symbolic mind. It was the way that voice knows to reach me. This is the language that I know is available to you right now. And the poem told me that the creative way forward was to write, like literally write.
Amazing, amazing. Now, you also went through spiritual exploration. What was that about?
So I believe that creativity in and of itself is a spiritual process. And spirituality to me is a highly creative process. So I feel like I've always sensed that I had a spirit and a soul. I've always believed in that. Like that's just been part of my instinct. And yes, there was a period of time where I was exploring a particular religion in an organized way because I was curious. And that was very helpful up to a point. That was very helpful. It certainly got me in touch with other metaphors for the divine. And it got me in touch with what I believe is the fundamental religious idea that unites, I think it can unite all religions, and I think it's also transcends any particular religion, is that the basic idea truly is love. It's about love for the divine, love for each other. We're here. We're here to be safe space for one another, to help one another, to be vulnerable together, to be empathic, to collaborate together, that we all have gifts. We're all given gifts that I believe are God-given gifts. And if we can each claim them and if we can each know that they're there and be in an environment that supports our cultivating them and expressing them. And if most of us are doing that, oh my goodness,
it would change the world.
Everything.
And the other love that I want to add is love of self, because a lot of us grow up people pleasing and worrying about everybody else, and we're as precious as anyone else in our world, and we need to take care of ourselves also.
Absolutely. Thank you. Because we too are sacred, and each of us, I believe each of us is given a sacred mission, and we're entrusted with that.
Yes. Absolutely. So let's talk about my favorite part of your life called the voice.
The voice, yes.
Could you describe voice to us? Share how it helped you meet your feelings and move through the shadows and light. And anything you want to tell us, because it really has helped you, just like I've gotten. I mean, even literally this podcast, one day I'm minding my business, I wrote my first book, and I hear the word podcast came into my head. So your voice was very similar. It must have come from a spirit guide or someone or whatever. So tell us about that.
So I don't know where it comes from, other than when I hear it, it's curious. I hear it from inside of myself, but I also feel like it's inside of me and outside of me almost at the same time. So that very first time that voice spoke to me so clearly was that moment looking in the mirror before I went out to try to help David, and it's calling me by name. And I'd say there's probably been 3 or 4 times in my life where voice has literally called me by name and been very, very direct. So that was one time. Another time was when I was working in the medical library there, University of Cincinnati Medical School in the library. And the man who would become my husband was in medical school there. And he came in one day and he sat on my desk, and we were just chatting. And really just chatting. And I was even dating someone else and was pretty serious about this other person. So Dan and I are chatting, and suddenly there's voice again. And voice, I think, called me by name once again and said, your future, this is a really good man here. He has a really good soul, and your future is bound up with this person. And again, I remember thinking, did anybody else hear what I just heard?
And I love that. I just love that.
No one else apparently did. And I didn't really want to move, because I thought if I move, I'm going to disrupt this beautiful energy field, because I know from my experience, this is the veil thinning. This is really a sacred and profound moment. And then, Dan walked away, and I really just sat there and went, wow, wow. Okay. Wow. So that was the second time. And then there was another time. Yeah. So years later again, very, very explicit. And then I'll come back to the less explicit, but very explicit. I had my master's degree in English literature, and I wanted to teach. And I thought I was going to teach at a university nearby, but I'm on a different campus, St. Mary's University. I got invited there to talk about my first book of poems. And I was very excited about that with my publisher at the time. After class, we stepped outside, and Karen and I are just speaking, and there's voice again. And it was if it was on the wind, almost blowing past me, but in my ear, and said, Cyra, I need you here. thought, okay, so Karen, are you all hiring in the English department? And she said, yes, we are. We're actually interviewing right now. This is what you do. And I taught there for 20 years, and the students changed my life. And I was just, it was just a magnificent time of being there. So sometimes voice speaks to me very directly, very almost hitting me, like, hello, Cyra. But as you so beautifully put it a few minutes ago, I think voice, particularly continuously, is always there in my poetry, is always there wanting to be part of my healing. And I also think I know voice shows up in my dreams and is giving me images, giving me dream narratives, connecting me with my brother's spirit, with David's spirit.
And I would not doubt that David is around you and trying to help you in your life also.
Yes.
I'm curious to ask you, have you ever communicated with David through a medium or anything like that?
I have not yet, but that is something that I'm very interested in doing soon. Like I'm just really curious now. And if I may, like, I do have a picture. I have a
Oh,
picture
please.
right
Oh, he
here.
was adorable. Oh my.
Those are the Tetons in Wyoming behind him.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow, how tragic. Oh my goodness. But there was a reason in a way, because what he did actually honed your voice for your poetry and all.
Yes. Yes. And
There's something when one day when you cross over, you're going to find out what all that was about.
I believe that, and I look forward to it. And I did learn, it's curious. I will say this, I did learn from someone I went to high school with just this summer, we had our 50th high school reunion. And I did learn from someone who was in my graduating class, and we were in the same homeroom all 4 years because the first letter of our last name. And she is very empathic, and she could, after David's death, she could feel literally what I was feeling inside. She sensed the struggle. She sensed the darkness. She sensed the sort of the smoky energy around me. And she could feel it was very real for her. And some years later, maybe 5 or 6 years later, there was a time in her life where she was in a really deep, dark place and was thinking about, had some suicide ideation. And she said she literally remembered me and that feeling around me and made a different decision. And that was a stunning thing for me to hear. Absolutely.
That's a very healing
So,
thing for you to
it's
hear.
very healing.
Very healing thing for you to
Yeah.
hear. So
Yeah.
now teach us, because people are saying, what the heck is poetic medicine?
Yes.
What does it mean to be a practitioner? And do you need special training for that?
Great question. So, yes, I think special training is important. Now, having said that, and I will describe that in a moment, but having said that, I feel like I was learning poetry was teaching me how to heal myself by simply doing it as a practice. And so when I learned that there was an organization called National Association for Poetry Therapy, and I started going to some of those meetings, and then I learned that someone I admired very much, John Fox, who I think of as one of kind of the second generation of establishing poetic medicine as a field, started before him, but he's a major contributor to it. And he's based in California where he lives, but he travels all over the country and internationally. But he was starting a certification program, and I'm in my early 50s, and I'm thinking, yep. So,
and how you just got guided right over to that is amazing. Like, really,
yes.
Talk about how it works. Yep.
Absolutely. It was my time. It was my time to do that. And so the training, first, we are expected to really establish that practice with ourselves, which was, I was already doing that, but I can always keep doing that and do it with more mindfulness, sort of more understanding as to even why it works. So why it works? Well, on many levels. And I would say, I think probably almost all your listeners, I imagine at some point have had an experience where they felt so emotional about something. They just wrote all their feelings down, just boom. And probably noticed afterwards, oh, wow, oh, oh, I think I can breathe a little bit better. I think the energy is a little bit clearer. I feel calmer. I got some of that out of my system. So I would say on just that first level, there can be an energy shift when it's a very intense kind of feeling. So there's that. It also can clear out space inside, which means we can breathe better. We can relax a little bit better. Our body can let go of some tension. So our body is now not holding the tension. So that's part of the healing of it. I have found that when I can bring imagery to my feelings, like that octopus image, I had an image along the way of my healing of carrying around the sense of, am I responsible for my brother's death as an earthquake? Just the earthquake of being involved in that. And that was an important image to have. Being able to bring this complicated inner emotional experience into words also creates a sense of orderliness to internal disorder, and putting some of the turmoil in here out there, but giving it the order, which also has a beauty to it, which brings pleasure and healing and breath.
It feels like it also brings completion in a way, closure.
Yes, I would say I think it allows closure for me in that moment with that particular feeling. And then it allows me to kind of move on to what I'm next ready to feel or think about or question or grow into. It allows room for more seeds, I think, to be planted and to explore and thus to keep growing. And then the other thing, Irene, is that when I can articulate difficult experiences internally in a way that can be shared with other people and share those insights, share those feelings, share those words, other people who have common feelings but haven't yet found that language can go, oh, I recognize that. I identify with that. I'm not so alone. Oh, and then that might open them up to explore their own world, or just to speak about what they're holding inside and they haven't
or
had.
Even plant a seed to get them to start to address it and think about
it. Yes, absolutely. Right. So like that poem I wrote about the faceless day, it ended up being a mirror for me. Okay, I need to change my life right now. I need to take steps right now and change my life. And I did. Step by step.
Amazing.
Yes.
Cyra, I want to, speaking of your poetry, we've talked about you're going to read two of your poems from your absolutely remarkable memoir. And her memoir is, aptly titled, Words Make a Way Through Fire. And I know you actually felt internal shifts take place within you as you shaped the poems in this memoir. Whatever you'd like to tell our listeners about it, because it's an amazing book. If they are inclined to read it and read your beautiful words, the poems are just fabulous. I would love you to tell everyone, and also read two of your moving poems in it called My Brother's Cup and Listening for Owl. And you can tell everyone a little bit of the background of each of those poems when you read it.
Thank you for that invitation, Irene. And it really does mean it's so wonderful to be able to read the poems. And I will say, it was necessary for me in the memoir to use both poetry and prose because I needed the prose part to express my questions and for reflection and for the narrative. So there's a whole section in there where I'm rebuilding my brother's life for myself by telling all the stories that I could remember about his life. And so I'm recreating him there for myself. And that was what I needed the prose for. But I needed the poems because the poems come out of my body's experience. Like, this is what it has felt like to have this experience in my body. This is what it has felt like to have this experience in my soul. This is what it has felt like in my experience to have it in my heart. Because poetry it expresses our body sensations, our heart sensations, our imagination sensations, and its soul sensations. It's the most holistic form of language I think there is. So this poem, My Brother's Cup, captures a moment when I was at my well into my years of processing my loss of David and my trauma, and well into really feeling a friendship with my brother through the dreams and him showing up and helping me heal. And I was literally in my mother's cabinet and I found this, my brother's baby cup. And it has his initials on the front and then his birth date, which was October 12th, 1954, on the back. And it was so wonderful to find that cup because I could find it and hold it and feel connected to him and remember the night of his death and then have it settle and then just and realize, oh my goodness, I'm holding the fullness of my brother's life right here and feel joy in it. So that's what the poem is trying to convey. My brother's cup, amidst chipped porcelain and stained coffee mugs stacked in mother's cabinet, glints my brother's silver cup. I reach for it, follow his engraved name and date of his birth with my finger. Pause. Memory of his self-inflicted death flares. Settles. It is good to find you here after years of reckoning. I open the water, rinse away traces of dust, fill my brother's cup. The water I drink now is clear and cool.
Which kind of feels like the water I drink now is your healing, that you're starting to heal.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Absolutely. And so I feel that poem honors both his life and the fullness of his life. Like here's his birth, here's his name, here's how he was loved in the family. And here is how my mother has carried this cup from home to home to home. She's made quite a few moves since we were all in that house there in Cincinnati. And she carried his cup with her. And it's part of the family. It's part of our family history. So it was powerful for me to hold his life, remember his death, and return to his life. And realize I'm not afraid to drink from this either. And I did. Like I made a point of doing that. And that just felt like a reunion with him. It just felt really
wonderful. Good. So healing. Tell us about Listening for Owl.
So Listening for Owl. Oh, this is a pretty recent one, like maybe the last year. And you'll hear in the poem, I reference a dream. And in this dream, literally, David shows up once again. So David has physically showed up in my dream multiple times. And I always love it when he does, because I truly feel I'm with him. And he was, my big brother, and he taught me how to play Frisbee. And the image on like the cover, if I could, I will read that poem in just a moment, but I feel like this is important. This photograph here, which is on the cover of the book, this is my brother David. He's probably 4. And this is me. I'm maybe 18 months old. My father took this photograph. It was black and white, but I'm leaning my head against my brother's head, and he's reaching off for something else. And I feel like this moment says so much about the lovingness of my brother, because he is choosing to hold his head steady while his sister leans her head against him. And he's busy. He's involved with something, but he wants that connection. And I want that connection with him. And that tenderness between us that was there as young children, I feel like is here in this poem too.
I feel like you had a special bond.
I didn't always know that.
Right? You had a bond, and now you've kind of returned to the bond now that he's on the other side.
Yes, I really do feel that way, Irene. I really do. Thank you. And so, Listening for Owl. I can't explain what happened or why. I don't know what it signifies or whether it changes anything or not. I only know that I had been missing the great horned owl hunting our neighborhood. It had been months since his rhythmic call had rippled through the dark, pierced my sleep, and winged me to the realm between flesh and shadow. where reunions between the breathing and the buried take place inside of dreams. I only know that my brother, long dead, filled me with his being. The shoreline of his gaze wove seaweed strands in infinite tides around me. His hand lightly brushed my back as if to prove his presence. My skin still quivers at the surprising touch. All these years, and still we recognize each other. Memory pulses across thresholds, and in the knowing song of owl, vanishing now in this dawn, while the space inside me that held my brother's form is still warm.
So beautiful. Thank you, Cyra. So beautiful. I really encourage everyone to get Cyra's book. If you're at all inclined and like poetry, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. And she has other wonderful, wonderful, wonderful books. And we'll be talking about one of those in a little while also. It's very powerful. So let's talk about Cyra. Now that you've read your poems, what does poetry writing offer someone? And we've kind of talked about what it offers someone recovering from a traumatic experience, but please explain how it's distinct from prose and its healing power. Because, and can writing in a journal be therapeutic, which I believe it does, but if someone's writing in a journal, that's more like prose, right? So what's the difference in the healing of the different formats?
Such a great question. So I think both are terrific. Both are terrific. So if one feels really drawn toward journaling and that works for you, like great, wonderful, wonderful. For me, the difference with poetry and prose is that, so with prose, usually we're writing it in sentences and we're kind of filling the whole page. And with poetry, I think one of the real pleasures of poetry is that we build in space and pauses, so if you have a page and you're just writing words there and then you write several words and then you leave a space and then you come down to the next line and leave a space. It's like I see my words all the more clearly. I'm seeing the images, I'm hearing the music of the words themselves. I'm more aware of silence, of breath. It actually slows me down so that I'm also listening more internally. It's a different way literally of seeing, and it's a different way of playing with language. I think it brings a level of just playfulness into it. So actually one of the things that I think that I've done a lot, and I think if someone is listening who does a lot of journaling already and they're kind of wondering how they might shift into poetry, something that is really fun to do is to actually go to your journal, take a passage from your journal that means a lot to you, whether because it's describing something that you really love, that you think is really beautiful, or you made a realization there that was really meaningful to you. And I would suggest get a fresh piece of paper and copy out those words from the journal passage, but do it as lines of poems. So maybe 5 or 6 words on one line and then 5 or 6 words underneath it, and start breaking those sentences down into phrases and just see how that looks on the page. And then you can try typing it up, and then you can start to play with like putting in spaces between lines and making stanzas. So what's a stanza? Well, the word stanza is an Italian word for room. And I love that. So in poetry, if you've ever seen a poem on the page, you might see where there are these chunks. If like it looks like a paragraph. We might call it a paragraph in prose. It's like a paragraph, that's a stanza, and then there's some space, couple lines in between, and then there's like another little paragraph, which is a stanza. Okay, so you can start to organize your lines into these groupings of lines called stanzas, and that it has the spacing between them. And I don't know, it just, by doing that, you start seeing into your own thoughts and feelings all the more. It gives us more time to hear to hear ourselves, hear our own wisdom, hear the music of our language. I think it's important to read our words out loud, to hear the music of the words. And the other part that is healing about poetry is medicine. Like when I read this aloud to you, Irene, so thank you for that invitation. When I read these poems out loud rather than silently on the page, my body is vibrating with those words. I'm an instrument. My body's an instrument. And those words are bringing me my own feelings. They're reconnecting me to that dream where I could feel David's presence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's making it more real. And I'm feeling his presence literally in my body all over again, which means I'm receiving that medicine, that connection to him again, one more time, because it's resonating in my body. If I'm just reading it on the page quietly to myself, I'm not going to get that, literally that vibrational physical experience.
I'm so glad you added that, because I'm sure a lot of people don't realize that. And when they read poetry, they're reading it on the page. And now they may think about that it's better to verbalize it, to let it reach the air. It brings it more depth, more meaning for them.
It
And
does.
speaking of David and what all that you went through with him, let's talk about breaking the importance of breaking the stigma around suicide.
Yes.
Oh my God, encouraging open dialogue and stronger support. We've had many people affected by suicide as interviewees on this podcast. So how does a community help families who experience the loss through suicide? This is a new topic that people are just beginning to really grapple with. It used to be like shrouded in shame and all these other things, right? So teach us about this, please, Cyra.
Sure. So the first thing I want to say is, if anyone listening again is thinking of, some suicide ideation, or if you have a loved one that you're concerned about, there is now a 24/7 suicide crisis hotline. All you need to remember is 988. 988. I didn't know that a year ago. 988. You can call this number anytime, and a counselor will answer, and they will be trained to be on the line with an individual and calm them in that situation. And the research that has been done on this it is incredibly effective. It is saving many, many lives. So 988. And if you're a veteran, there's also an option for a special, but you could still call that number, and there's an option for, I think, a counselor that can speak to someone as a veteran.
That's wonderful.
So, yes. And there's also an organization that didn't exist for me, my family at that time. It's called the American Federation for Suicide Prevention. It's afsp.org, afsp.org. And you can go online there. And again, if you've lost a loved one to suicide, you can find out information about support groups in your area. So it is so very important that families and friends who are dealing with the loss by suicide of a loved one have long-term support, non-judgmental support. It's such a long process of individuals finding how they're going to move forward with this experience. And
my sense of it is there's a lot of self-blame about suicide. What if I had done something differently, or I could have saved him? And probably these different hotlines and all reframe
yes,
what happened to the person, right?
yes. Well, the hotlines, yes, are both an important way of keeping someone from taking that step and taking their own life. And yes, I think they can be helpful for individuals who are struggling with that loss of a loved one. But yes, I think every loved one goes through a period, I think, of feeling as if they was I responsible in some way? So by being in a support group, you I think it normalizes, first of all, it becomes clear you're not alone in how you're struggling with this. And however you're struggling with this, that's a normal way to struggle with something that is so difficult, so overwhelming. And you're not crazy. And you can also have the advantage of hearing from people who are further ahead in their journey, can share with you, other individuals who are newer in this journey, what has been helpful for them. Because it is going to be it's going to be very individual. And that you're in a community where you can speak your feelings, whatever they are. I know I felt like I needed to protect other people from my story because there's a violence there. There's a scariness. And I don't talk about it lightly. I don't talk about it casually, but there were certainly times when I absolutely needed to speak about it directly. And it would have been great to have had an environment like that where I could. So to have a support group is really important. But even if you are just if you a family that's going through this and you're not sure how to be there for them, simply to be for them as their friend, just to be there, to keep showing.
And suspend judgment.
No judgment. And I would suggest that you don't speak about religious images with them. Just listen. Just listen. Just listen and tell them you love them. Tell them you love them. And it's not their fault. And just listen. And show up with food. Bring food over.
Nurture them.
Just, don't turn, even if you're not sure what to say and that worries you. Even if you just show up and you sit with them and hold their hand and you say nothing, your presence is everything. You don't need to know what to say. Your presence and your love for them is a lot.
Will help seed a lot. So now, once they felt your presence and your love, you also offer therapeutic writing circles, which you refer to as poetry circles for adults. So how do you work with individuals who are dealing with things, shaping their life stories and journeys through poetry, through your therapeutic writing circles? And are they online? How does it work for some people in our listening audience who may like to treat themselves to your therapeutic writing circle?
Sure. Well, I don't do them online, but I will say if you're interested in doing this online, the Institute for Poetic Medicine, so I believe it's poeticmedicine.org, which is the organization I was certified through. There are poetic medicine online courses that you can take through them. I do it in person. And I did it at St. Mary's University with students in the counseling center. We had a special room in there where we did it in the counseling center. I'm currently doing it at another counseling center here in San Antonio called the Ecumenical Center. But just the way that it works, we sit in a circle if we can, like literally chairs in a circle. We're all here together. So actually this Saturday, I will be showing up to do this. And it's open to any adult who wants to come. There's a whole group of people who've been coming almost every month for several years. And they come knowing that they can write about whatever's on their mind or heart. And again, it will be accepted. It will be affirmed. My job is to come with some poems to kind of get us started. And of course, to just set the space as being welcoming, hospitable. So glad you're here. You bring a sacred part of the circle to our circle that's uniquely yours to bring. Thank you. And then I have some poems that I've selected that I believe will speak to those individuals. So that's part of the training, how to choose poems for specific groups of people so they can connect to them. We read the poems aloud 2 times. So aloud, once again, twice. So we're really hearing the images. We're really feeling the feelings, feeling the music of the words. And I call it seeding the air, SEEDING. So it's like suddenly the images and the feelings and the music of the words are beginning to create the texture of our energies. People's memories are now coming. They're being stimulated by what they read in the poem, what we hear in the poem. Like, oh, I connect with this line or this line. We don't analyze the poem. I simply say, is there a line or an image in this poem that is speaking to you? And if so, would you like to just speak that line? and they'll just call it out again into the circle after we've read the poems aloud. And by speaking it, again, they're already aligning their heart, their mind, their voice, their body with some particular feeling and probably some particular situation in their life that they're working on in that moment. They may not fully be aware of it yet, but it's all happening. It's all a catalyst. So we do
You're
that.
providing a vehicle for them to express themselves.
Yes.
And explore their stories.
Exactly. And so we do that for a bit, and then there's time to write. And then so everyone has 15, 20 minutes or so and I encourage them to just get someplace comfortable, sit for a moment, kind of check in with what's bubbling inside of them, what inner creative voice is coming forward, what image is strong in their mind, and to trust themselves.
That's a big part of it too. Well, that's a very big, huge part of it. Cyra, I know that you have a special offer for members of our audience, and we're going to feature it in the show notes. And it has to do with this other wonderful book you have called Elder Moon,
Yes.
which is about aging and elder care. So tell us about this lovely offer that you're making.
Thank you. So
to our
Elder
audience.
Moon is a chapbook. So it's kind of a smaller collection of poems that functions like a memoir. And it's the story of my mother-in-law's kind of walking with my mother-in-law through her final years. And it's literally telling that story. One point she has a stroke, and there's a poem there that is moving through the 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7 days right after her stroke, and how she's slowly getting some language back. And it's literally chronicling that bit by bit by bit. Yeah. So yeah, it's very relatable for a lot of people who are walking alongside a loved one as they're aging. And she was a very special woman, very dear to me. So yes, I've got 10 copies of it set aside, signed for.
Hurry up, everyone. The information's in the show notes, and click on so you can get that free copy of that wonderful book, which is so generous and nice of you, really. And I also want to ask you about the importance of healing from profound loss and bearing traumatic witness. I ask everyone about why should we heal our wounds? Why is it worth it to us? What would you like to tell everyone, Cyra?
I believe that we as human beings are wired for healing. That is why we have creativity, in order to be able to transform our difficult struggles and traumatic experiences. That we're wired that way. It requires being vulnerable and different. There are going to be different modalities for different people. For me, it's been writing and it's been swimming. Someone else, it might be drumming, it might be music, it might be dancing, it might be painting. But I believe it's answering the soul's yearning to be whole. Because the soul is whole, wants to be whole, but it can feel fractured by trauma.
Absolutely. And blocked and all kinds.
But that can be temporary. It can be temporary. We need support. We need creativity. We need to have courage to enter into that and not feel alone. And that's why the support is important and creativity is important. And feeling as if there is a larger something out there that truly, truly wants our healing. And I believe without any doubt, from my own life experience, that is true.
Who would you have been if you hadn't healed this way? I mean, can you imagine if you were still carrying all that trauma from the past and all? My goodness. Oh my goodness.
Oh.
And how is finding joy in life through a creative practice related to the golden hour of the soul when everything aligns for transformation?
Oh, I've just had some of my most joyful moments writing a poem, certain poems that go, oh, wow, everything is just so right in that poem. I feel expansive. I feel bigger. I feel connected with the natural world, with the divine, with myself, with just totally aligned. And poetry gives me that.
That's joy.
It's joy. Absolutely joy. Yes.
That's your joy. Well, Cyra, as we come to a close, I am honored to share this deeply moving passage from your extraordinary book, Words make a way through fire, healing from my brother's suicide with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience. If not for writing poems, I would be struggling with depression. When writing, I feel such joy, liberation, expansiveness. I love the absorption of the creative process, one that is immensely spiritual, one that feels as if I am entwined with a generous and breath-filled spirit. When a poem feels fulfilled and finished, I feel peaceful. I liken poetry writing to prayer. When writing a poem, I encounter a life force that responds as I seek it. Spirit and I find each other. Perhaps I should say, voice and I find each other. Cyra, your words are a powerful testament to the power of creativity as a path to healing and resilience. Thank you from my heart for this beautiful and courageous conversation. I truly wish you abundant blessings. Thank you.
It has been a blessing to be here with you, Irene. Thank you for the blessing of this time and your presence and your purpose. It's an honor to be here. And
thank you.
Love to you all out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.